right, if you could please, first of all, show the jury where you were seated that night.
We were seated about row 14, 15, around this area.
All right, so if you could just make your best educated guess and then tell them where exactly, what seat you were in.
She can't guess. She can estimate.
I apologize, Your Honor. If you could just show the jury approximately where you believe that you were seated that night.
This row.
Okay.
And
if you could tell them what seat you were in.
I was in this seat.
Okay. And what seat was your boyfriend at the time, Mr. Rohrs, in?
He was in this seat, and Azariah was sitting in between us.
Right. And where was your son, Ethan?
Ethan was asleep, and he was in my boyfriend at the time's lap.
Now, what do you recall happening in the movie theater that night?
I remember watching the movie and at some point seeing the exit door on the right side opening and seeing something come flying across, and around right here in this area you heard a pop and then smoke, and I remember thinking like a prank, or sometimes you hear about different midnight premieres doing different things, and so we continued watching, and then you see the exit door open again, and you could see it because it was so dark, but you could see the light, and I just remember hearing popping sounds and my boyfriend yelling to get down, and my daughter was asleep, so I remember grabbing her and just throwing her to the ground and laying on top of her.
Now, could you show for the jury on the diagram where it was that you would have been putting Azariah on the ground and laying on top of her?
Right here.
And then what do you recall while you were on the ground with Azariah?
I just recall trying not to panic and thinking to myself to just thinking this isn't happening. And then I remember looking up and seeing my husband cradling Ethan and jumping over the seats to get safety because he was struggling to find
Objection
room.
as to speculation.
Sustained.
Right, so you saw him physically jump over seats?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you see him do?
After seeing him come over, I didn't see anything else, like where he went.
Okay, so you lost sight of Ethan
Yes.
and Mr. Rohrs at that point?
Yes.
So what happened with you and Azariah at that point?
We stayed down, and I just remember poking my head up to kind of see what was going on, to figure out what our next step was going to be. And I remember putting my head up and seeing flashes, and I put my head immediately back down, and as soon as I put it down, I remember feeling a pain in my right leg, and I remember screaming and saying, I think I got shot. And then I remember a voice behind me saying...
Objection as to hearsay.
It's being offered for the truth.
No, Your Honor.
What's it being offered?
It's offered for the effect on the listener.
All right, the objection's overruled.
Right, you can go ahead and tell the jury.
I remember hearing a voice say that I did too, and I remember feeling just a little bit of comfort knowing that I wasn't alone. And it was at that point where I realized that any movement that I made, if I was visible, it was probably going to be shot in that direction. So I tried to stay low, but I was still in my head trying to think, I need to get out of here. I can't stay in here. And at that point, I heard crying, and I looked up in the aisle and found Ethan. And I remember grabbing him, and that's when I knew that I had to get out. So I just started listening, and I noticed that the shots weren't coming as quickly, and that was when I took my opportunity to get up, and I pulled my daughter up and I dragged her up the stairs, and I remember there was that exit, and I knew I just had to get out those doors. And I remember going through the doors, and I was literally dragging Azariah behind me and holding Ethan and just trying my hardest to just get up.
So now when you found Ethan, was Ethan by himself?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And when you said earlier you had stood up and you saw some flashes, could you tell the direction of those flashes?
I could see that they were on that side of the theater.
And when you were hearing the gunshots in the theater, could you hear any different types of gunshots?
Yes, I noticed
Judge, I'm
that.
going to object now to foundation.
Overruled?
You can go ahead and tell the jury.
I remember that there were differences, like rapid shots, and then there were some that were a little deeper, but not as rapid.
And when you said that you heard the voice of someone also behind you who had said that he got hit also, where was that? Was that person in the same aisle as you?
Yes, it was in the same aisle.
So when you said behind you,
It was, we were right here, so somewhere, in that seat right there.
now did you have an opportunity after the shooting to meet that individual?
Yes, I did.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's no longer not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
I don't think the question called for hearsay, so the objection's overruled. I don't think it was a question about what was said.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So did you have an opportunity to meet that individual after the shooting?
Yes, I did.
And do you know who that person is?
Yes, I do.
And what is that person's name?
Jarrell Brooks.
Okay. So how did you go about, just if you could show on the diagram how it was that you went out about getting out of the theater?
I grabbed the kids and ran up this way, and I remember having to go through one door, and it was a little room, and then going out another into like a staircase that went out into the lobby.
All right. And earlier, I think I'd asked you if you had an opportunity to hear different types of gunshots, and what were the differences that you remember hearing?
Some of the shots were more rapid, constant, boom, and then the other set was not as rapid, but like a deeper sounding.
Thank you very much. You can go ahead and take your seat back at the witness stand. Now, what happened when you...
Hold on, Mr. McGuire, before you proceed. The last objection as to hearsay is actually now sustained based on what you said. This went to identification, but there was not enough foundation, so that is hearsay. So the statement by this witness as to who the person was behind her, that is stricken, and the jury will disregard it and treat it as though it never heard it. All right, you may proceed.
After you got through the door, the theater, what did you do next with Azariah and Ethan?
I remember walking around the parking lot, hoping to find Jamie, because at that point I had no idea what happened to him. I left my purse and cell phone in the theater, so thankfully someone lent me their phone, and I called him.
And I'm going to object to relevance as to what happened outside of the theater.
What's the relevance?
There's how she goes about getting medical treatment.
Okay, the objection is overruled.
So someone lent me their cell phone, and I was able to get a hold of Jamie. We found him right away, and he could see that I was bleeding from my leg. So he, instead of waiting, because at the time it was still chaos, so we jumped in his truck, and he drove me straight to the hospital.
What hospital did you go to?
Is it the Colorado University? I can't remember the exact
University.
name. Yeah, University Hospital.
What injuries had you sustained at the theater?
It was shrapnel.
Your Honor, if I may approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibits 2548 and 2547.
Yes.
Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes.
Could you, do they fairly and accurately represent you at the theater on July 20th, you at the hospital on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Okay. And do they fairly and accurately represent the injuries that you sustained at the theater?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move for the admission of People's Exhibits 2548 and 2547.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, P-TR-2547 and 2548 are admitted and may be published.
Thanks. If I could please have 2548. All right, this picture of you at the hospital that night?
Yes.
Or early morning, rather. And if I could please have 2547. And that's the injuries you sustained to your legs?
Yes.
Did you also sustain some shrapnel injuries to any other part of your body?
Yes.
And could you tell the jury about that, please?
You can take that picture down.
On my right leg as well, all the way up my thigh and up to my hip.
You had shrapnel injuries all
Yeah.
the way up, and they just didn't take pictures of those?
No.